The mysterious offer. The air was thick with tension as the young soldier stood in front of the alien council. He had never imagined that his first mission as a human soldier would lead him to a meeting with some of the most powerful and mysterious beings in the universe. The council chamber was vast, filled with beings from worlds far beyond his own. There were tall, slender aliens with shimmering skin, small creatures with multiple eyes, and even ones that seemed to shift and change in the blink of an eye. The soldier, whose name was Jason, had always dreamed of being part of something bigger. He had trained his entire life for this moment, to prove himself worthy, to show that humanity had a place among the stars. But now that he was here, standing in front of the council, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The council members didn't speak or make any moves. They just observed him silently, and their eyes, some with multiple irises, locked on him. It was as though they were studying him, analyzing him in ways he couldn't understand. Jason stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest. He was no stranger to pressure. He had survived battlefields, intense training simulations, and even had a few close calls with death. But this was different. This was a moment he had never prepared for. One of the council members finally spoke. It was an alien with glowing blue skin and 6 arms, a species Jason had never encountered before. Its voice was deep, almost vibrating in his chest as it echoed through the chamber. "Human soldier," the alien said, "you have proven your worth. You have fought bravely in the name of your people, and now, as part of our tradition, we offer you a reward, a choice." Jason raised an eyebrow. "A reward? What do you mean?" The alien smiled, though it wasn't a smile anyone would want to see. It was a knowing grin, and as if the alien had seen it all before and knew something Jason didn't. "You will choose," the alien continued. "Choose one of our own, one of our females, as a token of your achievement. She will be yours to do as you please." Jason's confusion deepened. He had heard stories about alien cultures and their strange customs, but this was something he hadn't expected. "Wait, hold on," he said, his voice faltering. "You want me to pick one of your females?" The council members didn't respond, but their silent attention was enough to make Jason uneasy. The blue-skinned alien nodded slowly. "Indeed," the alien replied. "You will choose a female as your reward. She will serve you, assist you, whatever your heart desires. This is the way of our kind." Jason glanced at the other council members, but they remained silent. He didn't know what to say. The idea felt strange, uncomfortable even, but it was part of their tradition, and he couldn't back down now. He had to go along with it. Before he could speak, the blue-skinned alien raised a hand and gestured. The doors to the chamber opened and a group of alien women walked in. They were all beautiful in their own ways. Some were tall and graceful, with long limbs and sparkling eyes. Others had strange features, bioluminescent skin, transparent wings, and faces that seemed to glow in the dim light. Each one was a vision of alien beauty, unlike anything Jason had ever seen before. They stood in a line, waiting for him to make his choice. Jason could feel the weight of their gazes upon him, their eyes locked on him like prey. They were all so different from one another, yet each one had a unique beauty. Jason's eyes moved over each of them, trying to take it all in. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He hadn't expected to be put in this kind of situation. The pressure was mounting, and he could feel the sweat on his brow. But then, his gaze fell on one alien woman who stood at the end of the line. She was different from the rest. She wasn't as tall, and her features weren't as delicate. She was bigger, her body fuller and rounder compared to the others. She had a kind of warmth in her eyes that the others lacked, and something about her made Jason stop. Her skin wasn't glowing or shimmering like the others. Instead, it had a soft, earthy tone, like the color of clay. She was wide at the hips, and her face had a softness to it, as though she had seen things in life that had made her gentle. Jason wasn't sure why, but his eyes lingered on her. She wasn't perfect, not in the traditional sense, but there was something about her that called to him. Maybe it was the way she stood, unbothered by the attention or the quiet strength in her gaze. The other women were stunning, without a doubt. But for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about her. She wasn't what he expected to choose. She wasn't the most beautiful, but there was something real about her. Jason swallowed hard. He had to choose. He could feel the weight of the decision on his shoulders. Everyone was watching him. He had to make a choice. He took a deep breath and looked at the woman once more. He pointed. "I choose her," Jason said, his voice strong despite the doubts swirling inside him. There was a pause. The other women looked surprised, some even shocked. The council members were quiet, and their faces unreadable. The woman at the end of the line stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. She seemed just as surprised as everyone else, but there was something else there too. Curiosity, perhaps even hope. Jason couldn't explain it, but he knew he had made the right choice. He just didn't know why yet. The alien girls' lineup. Jason's heart was still racing as the doors to the council chamber swung open, revealing the group of alien women who had been chosen for him to select from. He was almost certain that his decision wasn't going to be easy, but now that he was staring at the lineup, the weight of the moment settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. These women, though so very different from anything he had seen back on Earth, were all undeniably beautiful in their own ways. They seemed to glow in the soft light of the room, their strange features mesmerizing in the dim alien glow that surrounded them. The first woman in line was tall, almost towering over him. She had skin that shimmered like polished silver, smooth and flawless, reflecting the light in a way that made it seem almost ethereal. Her eyes were a deep violet, large and piercing, and Jason couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward her. Her long limbs and graceful movements made her look like she belonged to a world of elegance, someone who had lived her life as royalty among her people. The second woman was shorter, but no less striking. Her skin was a translucent pale blue, with delicate patterns swirling across her face and neck. Her eyes were like twin pools of deep ocean water, and there was an air of mystery about her, like she carried a secret that Jason was not meant to know. Her delicate features and elegant posture made her seem almost fragile, but there was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself. Each of the women was unique, and each had something about them that caught Jason's attention for a moment. But none of them made him feel anything other than awe. Then his eyes drifted to the last one in line, the one he had initially noticed when she entered. She wasn't like the others. She was much larger in size, her figure fuller, rounder, and more grounded in a way that made her stand out starkly against the others. Unlike the other women who seemed to float effortlessly in the room with their grace and beauty, this woman stood firmly on the ground, as though she was at peace with who she was. Her skin was the color of earth, rich and warm, and her eyes, though not as sharp or exotic as the others, held a certain softness to them. There was no glow, no shimmer to her skin, but instead a natural, comforting hue. Her features were not delicate but bold, with a round face that carried both strength and kindness. Her eyes, a deep brown with flecks of amber, looked at Jason with a calmness that made him pause. There was something real about her, something raw, something that seemed to promise a life beyond the surface, beyond the beauty that was often put on display. She wasn't perfect, but her imperfections were what made her stand out. Jason couldn't place it at first, but there was a pull in his chest when his gaze met hers. For some reason, she felt different from the others. He didn't know why, but she wasn't like anyone he had ever seen. As his eyes scanned her, Jason found himself feeling a strange sense of calm. The other women, though beautiful, felt like they were distant, like they were someone he could never reach. But the larger alien woman felt different. There was something familiar about her, something that drew him in even though it made no logical sense. She wasn't graceful or dainty like the others. She wasn't delicate or seemingly perfect in the way the others were. But she had an aura of strength about her that Jason couldn't ignore. She wasn't like the others who seemed untouchable, too perfect to connect with. She was grounded, and in her presence, Jason felt a kind of stability that he hadn't expected. There was no flash of radiance or light around her, no overwhelming beauty that could make his heart race with desire. But there was an undeniable connection, something that tugged at him in a way he couldn't describe. He couldn't stop thinking about her, not in the way he thought he should be thinking about someone chosen to be a reward. Jason felt a pull in his chest as his mind raced, trying to make sense of the feelings swirling inside him. He looked back at the others, who were still waiting, poised and perfect. But even as his eyes lingered on them, his thoughts kept returning to her. The large, unassuming alien woman, the one who seemed to carry an unspoken weight, the one who didn't try to hide her imperfections. She felt real, in a world that seemed so unreal. The room fell silent as Jason's eyes flicked from the alien woman back to the council members, then to the other women. His heart was pounding in his chest as the weight of the decision pressed down on him. The atmosphere in the chamber seemed to thicken with expectation. The council, alien beings from planets he could never dream of understanding, watched him like hawks. They were waiting, their eyes trained on him, eager to see his choice. Jason was no stranger to making difficult decisions. He had fought battles, faced enemies that sought to destroy his home and people. But this was something else entirely. He wasn't choosing between life and death. He was choosing something far more complicated. His future, his happiness, his bond with an alien race that had offered him a reward for his service. As the minutes stretched on, Jason felt himself torn. He had trained for years for this moment, preparing to represent humanity on the grand stage. He had faced the toughest battles, the most intense situations, and had come out victorious. But none of that had prepared him for this. He wasn't prepared to choose between beautiful, perfect alien women, especially not when he was so unsure about the implications of his decision. The other women were stunning, flawless in their design. Their alien beauty was intoxicating, and Jason couldn't deny the appeal of the first few women he had glanced at. Their delicate, ethereal features seemed to promise an escape from the harshness of life on Earth. They seemed perfect in every way. But as his mind returned to the woman at the end of the line, Jason felt something different stir in him. It wasn't about physical perfection, he realized. It was something deeper, something more primal. He wasn't looking for beauty alone. He wasn't even sure he wanted that. What he was drawn to was the unknown, the authenticity in the larger woman's eyes. The other women were beautiful, but they felt like they had been crafted for display, their beauty a mask for something more shallow. Jason's hand trembled slightly as he took another step forward. He couldn't explain it, but it was as though something inside him was pulling him toward her. He wasn't just choosing someone to stand by his side, he was choosing a future, a connection that went beyond superficial attraction. It was as though the universe had given him this moment to make a choice, to choose what truly mattered. And in that moment, with all eyes on him, Jason knew what he had to do. He took another breath, steadied himself, and stepped forward, pointing at the last woman in line, the one with the kind eyes and the grounded presence. "I choose her," Jason said, his voice firm yet unsure. His heart was racing, but he knew in his gut it was the right decision. The council's faces remained unreadable, but Jason could see a flicker of surprise in their eyes. The woman at the end of the line stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. She seemed just as surprised as the others, but there was something else there too: curiosity. Jason didn't know it yet, but his choice was going to change everything. The chamber remained eerily silent for what felt like an eternity after Jason made his choice. And the alien council, who had been watching him with calm, unreadable expressions, now appeared slightly stunned. The beauty of the other women seemed to pale in comparison to the massive shift in the atmosphere that Jason had just caused. The alien girl he had chosen, the one standing at the end of the line, was not the perfect vision of grace and elegance that everyone had expected him to pick. She wasn't tall and slender, with glowing skin and sparkling eyes like the others. She was different, and the council seemed perplexed by his decision. Jason could feel their eyes on him, sizing him up, as if they were questioning his judgment. They had all believed that he would choose one of the flawless, shining women. After all, that was what any soldier, any man, would want. But instead, he had chosen her, the one who didn't fit in, the one whose appearance didn't conform to the beauty standards that the council and the universe itself had set. It was like he had broken an unspoken rule. And the woman he had chosen took a step forward, her large form moving gracefully despite her size. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and something else. Perhaps hope? Her eyes held a quiet intensity that Jason found calming. She didn't smile at him, nor did she seem angry or offended. She simply looked at him, as if waiting for him to explain himself. She seemed as surprised as the council, but there was a quiet understanding in her gaze, a sense of acceptance. Jason felt a twinge of something strange, maybe guilt, maybe relief, as he watched her approach. He couldn't fully explain it, but he knew that something important was unfolding. His mind was clouded with confusion, but also a growing sense of certainty. For some reason, he didn't feel regret. The council didn't immediately speak. The silence stretched, and Jason felt every second of it. He had made his choice, but now he wondered if he had made the right one. The women standing beside the chosen girl looked at him with shock, and there was an air of disappointment hanging around them. They had been the perfect candidates, the flawless ones that everyone expected him to choose. Why had he chosen someone so different? The council shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves in their strange language, but their voices were low and full of surprise. They clearly hadn't anticipated this reaction from Jason, and it made them uncomfortable. Still, they made no move to change the situation. The woman he had chosen stood still, waiting patiently for what would come next. It was almost as though she had expected this moment, as though she had anticipated that Jason's choice would be something out of the ordinary. There was no judgment in her gaze, only understanding. Jason glanced over at the council, but they remained silent. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, one of the members, a tall, thin alien with a long and almost serpentine neck, spoke up. "Human," the alien began, its voice rich and deep. "You have chosen her." It was clear that the words weren't meant as an insult, but the alien's tone carried an air of disbelief. "Are you sure this is the choice you wish to make?" Jason nodded, his voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty that ran through him. "Yes, I choose her." The alien's eyes narrowed slightly, and it seemed to search Jason's face, trying to understand his reasoning. But there was nothing more to say. The choice had been made, and there was no turning back. The woman moved to stand beside him, her eyes still fixed on him, not with anger, but with something deeper, something Jason couldn't yet name. The council, though still in shock, didn't question him further. They had rules, and they would respect the decision even if they didn't understand it. The woman who had once stood at the end of the line now stood at Jason's side. It was clear that this moment, This choice had changed everything. But Jason didn't know how or why, yet. As Jason and the alien woman left the council chamber together, a strange sense of calm washed over him. The rest of the room, still filled with hushed murmurs from the council members, seemed distant now. He felt as if he had crossed a threshold, one that had pushed him into a new reality. The woman walked beside him silently, her presence both grounding and comforting. She didn't try to speak to him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jason didn't feel the need to say anything either. They simply walked in silence, and that was enough. Jason kept stealing glances at her, but she didn't seem to notice or care. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, but there was something in the way she carried herself, something deep and powerful, that made Jason pause. She wasn't like the others. The others had been radiant, flawless in their beauty, and their presence as breathtaking as they were intimidating. But this woman wasn't like that. She didn't have the sharp, otherworldly beauty that had drawn him to the others. No, she was something else entirely. Her form was solid, grounded, as though she was firmly connected to the world around her. And her eyes, those deep, warm brown eyes, spoke volumes. For the first time since he had walked into the chamber, Jason felt no pressure. There was no need to impress. No need to worry about what others thought. He didn't have to pretend or put on a facade. There was just her. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he didn't feel the need to try to understand everything about her immediately. Instead, he found himself simply appreciating her presence. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She wasn't concerned with her appearance or how the others saw her. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. And Jason realized that he admired that. And he hadn't expected to feel this way, but there was something about the way she stood, so calm, so confident in herself, that made him respect her in ways he couldn't articulate. In that moment, he understood that she had something more valuable than outward beauty. She had substance, something real, something grounded that the others didn't seem to have. He could feel it, a connection between them that wasn't based on looks, but on something deeper. There was a quiet strength about her, and a wisdom that seemed to come from years of living on a world where survival required more than just beauty. They reached a quiet room far away from the council's gaze, and for the first time, Jason spoke. "I don't know why I chose you," he said, his voice a little shaky. "But something about you, I couldn't ignore it." She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable, and then she nodded, as if she understood. "I didn't expect this either," she replied quietly. "But maybe you saw something in me that others didn't." Jason nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time, he didn't feel like a soldier trying to impress anyone. He felt like a man who had made a choice for himself, and for the first time, that was enough. The days following Jason's decision passed in a blur. He and the alien woman, whose name he had learned was Vara, spent most of their time in quiet companionship, and the rest of the council's reactions seemed to be forgotten in the peaceful solitude that they now found themselves in. The weight of choosing her had lifted from Jason's shoulders, replaced by a growing curiosity and a sense of calm he hadn't expected. But there was more to Vara than Jason had initially thought, and he would soon discover that she wasn't just the quiet, grounded woman he had believed her to be. One evening, as they sat in a secluded area of the base, enjoying a moment of peace away from the chaos of the council, the tranquility was suddenly shattered. A loud, shrill alarm rang throughout the complex, the lights flashing red as soldiers scrambled to prepare for an attack. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he stood up, adrenaline flooding his veins. He had faced battles before, but this felt different. He didn't know what he was walking into, and the unknown was always the most dangerous enemy. The doors to the room burst open. And a few soldiers rushed in, weapons ready. "The base is under attack," one of them shouted. "We need to evacuate." Without hesitation, Jason grabbed his gear and started to move. But as he turned to look at Vara, he saw something that made him pause. She was standing still, her expression calm, almost as though she wasn't fazed by the chaos around them. She locked eyes with him, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Go," she said quietly. "I'll be fine." Jason's instincts told him to argue, to insist that they leave together, but something in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't scared. She wasn't running. She wasn't going to hide. She was going to face whatever was coming, and that calm certainty filled him with an uneasy respect. He nodded, unsure of what to say before he turned and ran toward the exit, trusting that she would follow. But as he stepped into the hall, he heard something that made him stop dead in his tracks. There was a loud thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. But these weren't the footsteps of soldiers or enemies he had fought before. These were something different. The walls vibrated as if the very ground was shaking beneath them. Jason spun around, running back to the room. What he saw next left him speechless. Vara, who had been standing calmly just moments before, was now at the center of the room. Her arms raised as she focused on something Jason couldn't see. Her eyes were glowing now, an eerie golden light that filled the room with an otherworldly intensity. Her body was pulsing with energy, the air around her vibrating as though she was drawing power from something unseen. And then, with a swift, fluid motion, she slammed her hands together and the ground beneath her feet cracked open, sending a shockwave throughout the room. The soldiers who had been rushing to leave froze in place, their weapons lowered, staring in awe at the incredible power Vara had just displayed. Jason stood in the doorway, his mouth hanging open, unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed. Vara wasn't just a quiet, grounded woman. She was a force to be reckoned with. The once unchallenged silence she carried now made sense. She had kept her true power hidden, but it was clear now that she wasn't just any alien. She was something entirely different, something far more dangerous. Vara turned to him, her eyes now returning to their normal, calm brown hue. The golden glow faded as quickly as it had come. "Get ready," she said in a low voice, her calm demeanor unwavering. "The enemy is already inside. We have to fight." Jason didn't need to be told twice. The shock of what he had seen faded as his instincts kicked in. They were no longer just two individuals caught up in something they didn't understand, and they were a team, and the danger was real. With a newfound respect for Vara, Jason grabbed his weapon and ran to join the others. But this time, he wasn't just following orders. He was fighting alongside someone who had already proven herself as a force of nature. As the battle raged on, Jason fought with a renewed sense of purpose. The sound of blasters firing, the hum of alien ships crashing into the base, and the desperate cries of soldiers echoed through the halls. It was chaos. But for Jason, it felt almost like a moment of clarity. He was no longer just a soldier fighting for his planet. He was fighting for something deeper. The connection between him and Vara had become something unspoken, something that went beyond physical attraction or the need for survival. It was a bond that had been forged in the heat of battle and tempered by their shared experiences. They worked together seamlessly, covering each other's backs, communicating in a way that required no words. Jason had been trained for combat, but Vara's strength, her ability to sense danger before it happened, her power to control the battlefield with just a thought, these were things he could never have predicted. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, prepared for it in ways Jason couldn't fully understand. By the time the battle was over, the base had suffered damage, but they had successfully driven the enemy back. Jason stood among the wreckage, catching his breath, his heart still racing from the adrenaline. As the last of the enemy forces retreated, he turned to Vara, who was standing beside him, as calm and composed as ever. He had just witnessed her power firsthand, and he realized that there was much more to her than he had ever imagined. "I didn't know," Jason admitted, his voice thick with awe. "I had no idea you were capable of that." Vara smiled slightly, her gaze soft but filled with understanding. "You never asked," she said. I never told you." Jason paused for a moment, considering her words. The truth hit him then. The reason he had chosen her, the reason he had felt so drawn to her, wasn't just because of her power. It was because she had shown him something that the others couldn't. A deeper understanding of what strength truly meant. Strength wasn't just about appearances or flawless beauty. It was about resilience, about standing firm in the face of adversity. Vara had been everything he had needed. Not because she had proven herself physically, but because she had shown him the value of emotional and inner strength. "I chose you because," Jason began, "I could feel it. Something real in you that I didn't see in the others. I didn't know you could do all this," he gestured to the destruction around them. "But I knew you were someone I could count on. Someone who wasn't afraid to stand by my side, no matter what." Vara's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, and I chose you because you saw me for who I am, not just what the others expected you to see. You saw beyond the surface, and that's something rare, even among my people." Jason nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. The truth of it all settled in him with clarity. His choice wasn't just about what others saw, it was about what he saw, and about the connection that had formed between them. He had chosen her because she was more than just a reward. She was someone who had proven herself worthy of his trust, and together they were stronger than anything the universe could throw at them. Days passed after the battle, and the world around Jason seemed to shift in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. Vara's strength had saved them all, but it was more than that. Her calm, her wisdom, and her ability to look beyond the surface of everything were the true assets that had allowed them to win. As Jason spent more time with her, and he began to realize that their bond was far deeper than he could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about the alien woman he had chosen, it was about the shared understanding they had cultivated without speaking a word. One evening, as the stars above the planet's surface twinkled brightly in the night sky, Jason and Vara sat together in silence. The base had settled into a quiet lull after the chaos, and for the first time, Jason allowed himself to relax, and the weight of the past few days seemed to lift as he sat next to Vara, feeling her presence beside him. "You know," Jason said, breaking the silence, "when I first chose you, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I wasn't even sure why I was drawn to you, but now I realize that it wasn't just about picking someone to stand by my side. It was about finding someone who would change me, someone who could help me understand things I never thought about before." Vara looked at him, and a faint smile on her lips, but there was something in her eyes that held an unspoken wisdom. She didn't say anything at first, but her hand reached out, gently placing it over his. It was a simple gesture, but for Jason, it spoke volumes. It was in that moment that he realized she had always understood him better than he understood himself. Vara had seen him not as a soldier, but as a person, a human who needed someone to help him see beyond the immediate, beyond the physical. I think we both learned something here," Vara said softly. "You saw me for who I truly am, not what others expected. And I chose you because you were willing to see me beyond my appearance, beyond my power. We've both been misunderstood, each in our own way, but together, we make sense." Jason couldn't help but agree. Their journey hadn't just been about the battles they fought or the enemies they had faced. It was about learning to trust, and to rely on each other in ways that didn't just come from strength, but from vulnerability. They had built something in each other, something real. Just then, a message came through on Jason's communicator. It was a call from the council, the same group that had watched him choose Vera, questioning his decision, but now, perhaps, seeing something different in their bond. He had learned so much from his time with Vera, and it was time for the council to understand the truth as well. He stood up, and his heart steady and resolute. "Let's go. It's time they hear what we've learned." Vera stood beside him, her strength unshakable as ever. Together they walked toward the council's chamber once again, knowing that this time their voices would not be drowned out by doubt. This time, they would show the council and the universe that strength didn't lie in beauty or perfection, but in the deeper, more human connections they had forged between them. The council chamber was as imposing as ever, and filled with beings from distant worlds, all silently waiting as Jason and Vara stepped inside. The room had an eerie quiet to it, and the council members were watching them carefully, their expressions unreadable. The same blue-skinned alien that had spoken to Jason before stepped forward, his 6 arms folding in front of him as he addressed them. "Human soldier," the alien began, his voice deep and booming. "You made a choice, and now we see that choice before us. What has this decision taught you? What have you learned from this union with one of our kind?" Jason stood tall, his gaze unwavering as he looked at the council. He felt no fear now. He had learned enough from Vara, enough to understand that this moment wasn't about proving anything. It was about truth, and he was ready to speak it. "I've learned," Jason began, his voice steady, "that the true strength of a person, whether human or alien, lies not in appearances, but in what they hold within themselves. I chose Vara because I saw something in her that none of you did. You all saw her size, her form, and thought she was unworthy of my choice. But what I saw in her was something real, a power that went beyond the physical. I saw wisdom, resilience, and an understanding that no one else here seemed to recognize." Vara stepped forward, her eyes meeting Jason's. She didn't speak, but her presence beside him made his words stronger, and she was his equal in every sense, and this moment was theirs. The council shifted, some of them exchanging looks as they absorbed Jason's words. The blue-skinned alien paused before speaking again, a hint of something like understanding flickering in his eyes. "Perhaps we have misjudged. Perhaps your choice holds more significance than we first realized." Jason nodded, the weight of the moment sinking in. "It's not about proving something to you. It's about what we have created together. The bond we've forged. That's what matters. Strength is not just physical. It's the ability to connect, to see each other for who we are, not for what we appear to be." For the first time, the council members stood in silence, contemplating Jason's words. It was clear that their perspective had shifted. The blue-skinned alien bowed his head slightly, an acknowledgement of something Jason couldn't quite grasp. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the realization that they had changed something in the way the council viewed the universe, and that made Jason proud. Jason and Vara left the council chamber together, walking side by side into the future they had just begun to carve. The road ahead was unknown, filled with challenges and opportunities, but Jason was no longer afraid. He had made the right choice. He had chosen someone who had shown him the value of inner strength, the power of trust, and the beauty of authenticity. They had faced enemies together, but more importantly, they had faced their own fears and doubts. In each other, they had found the courage to be real, to be human, and to break through the expectations placed on them by the universe. And now, they were ready for whatever came next. As they walked into the unknown, their bond stronger than ever. Jason knew that this wasn't just the beginning of a partnership, it was the beginning of something far more significant, something that would change the course of history. Together, Jason and Vera would show the universe what it truly meant to be strong.